Hey folks, thanks for listening to The Kira Banks Show. In this episode of Ask Dr. Banks, a mother seeks advice about how to handle the racism her son is experiencing at school. All names of persons and organizations have been changed to protect their anonymity. All voices, where necessary, have been altered with the use of AI technology. That's right, real stories, made-up names, fake voices.
Today's episode is another Ask Dr. Banks episode in the sense that I had someone reach out to me who has a son who's Black, a St. Louis high schooler playing sports, and is experiencing a lot of racism at his school. And so I thought, it's worth having her come on the show and share because it's really important that we share the stories, not only of what our kids are navigating, but also the stories of how we support them. And so I want to thank you for sharing and being willing to come on the show. And for those of you who are listening, if you have something that's happening in your life where you want to ask Dr. Banks and share your experience and we can problem solve together, feel free to reach out. You can reach me on all my socials. I'm Dr. Kira Banks, and I'd love to hear from you. So thanks so much for joining us. I really do appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for answering my question.
Yes. So what can I help you with? What's going on?
My son, as you mentioned, goes to a private school that he was very excited about going to, but it has not turned out the way that he had hoped, in that he tells me that probably 90% of the students use the N-word, and there are a lot of racist jokes, that he is often the butt of a lot of those jokes, especially because much of his friend group is white, and he's kind of become the person that they all pick on and make jokes about. It's even gotten to the point where there's just like obscene pictures that get passed around Snapchat of him, photoshopped, obviously, jokes about being a slave, things like that. And it took him a long time to really come forward with all of that. I was getting the sense, obviously, that he was not enjoying it as much as I thought that he would. But once he started talking about it, I, first of all, wasn't even sure that he was telling me the whole truth. And because I knew that the parties he goes to, a lot of the kids do use the N-word, and I really needed to figure out, how bad is this? So I'd just been wrestling with it because now he wants to transfer schools, and it felt like we worked so hard to get him into this school that I didn't want to just uproot him for nothing. I thought maybe this is something that he's just going through a phase, or he's being sensitive, or maybe he's exaggerating, but it turns out that that is not the case. So now I'm trying my best to figure out how to support him while we make these next steps.
Oh, that's so hard. It's hard to hear that he's experiencing this. And I'm glad you reach out to think about how to support him. So for those who are listening and aren't watching, right, we have video and audio. I want to just have you share, like, how do you identify racially? How does your son identify racially?
I would say most people, when they see me, assume that I am white. I consider myself to be mixed race, and my son considers himself to be Black.
Okay. So I add that layer because there's this piece around, like, how do you support him? And there's a different racial identity there, it sounds like. And so that's a piece of this story.
Right. I have learned so much being his mother, and a lot of the time it's a struggle. I mean, I know it's a struggle for Black mothers as well, but not having gone through the experiences that he has gone through, I, at least early on, set it up that he feels comfortable in coming to me and talking to me about these things. And I don't know if I always give him the right answers, but I just always want to be there to listen to him and to try and figure out the best way to deal with it. But it's a work in progress all the time. I never know if I'm handling it right. And sometimes I want to be this mama bear and, fight for this. But every time something like this has happened and I have tried to address it with people at school or people at an organization or people at a sports club, there's never any real satisfaction about it. And my son's like, Mom, just forget about it. Just let it go. So that's always the conundrum too. Do I just let it go? Do I do something? Do I use my privilege to try and make some kind of change? But then it's not easy to make anything change.
It's not easy. And I just want to name that you're doing what you can do. Like you said, your mama bear instinct comes out. You want to protect him. And sometimes it's not like a competition, like who has it worse, but like as a mom, whether you're a Black mom, a mixed race mom, a white mom raising a Black child, it's just hard. So I want to just name that you're doing what you need to do. Like even just thinking, how do I support him? He's saying, mom, don't be so difficult, right? My boys do the same thing. Like, oh, you're making a big deal out of it. But that mom part of us wants to protect them. And we know they shouldn't be experiencing this because it sounds like this is not the first time this has happened. Before we move on to get more backstory, I want to pause. Some people might be listening to this story so far and think, this kid needs to grow up. We've all been called names. If that's you, I want to share that we have decades of research that has found race-based bullying and discrimination can increase symptoms of depression, symptoms of anxiety, and decrease academic performance. Teenagers don't need any help with those things, so this is not something to dismiss. Now, if you're listening and you're empathizing with the child or the mother helping him navigate these incidents, I want you to take some deep breaths because there's more to come. To be honest, there were a couple of times during this conversation where I had to take a few deep breaths or feel my chest tighten and calm myself down from being so angry hearing what this child had to endure. Because it sounds like this is not the first time this has happened.
It's definitely not, but it feels different now. Because when he started playing club sports, he started getting called the N-word a lot.
Okay.
And it was kind of new to him. I mean, it hadn't been the first time. I think the first time he was called the N-word was probably in 4th or 5th grade, and it was really upsetting.
Was it at school?
That was at school.
Okay.
And that was not handled well either. He reported it to a teacher because, of course, I had told him, report it to a teacher. And anyway, but when he started playing club sports, it started happening a lot. And he would get really upset about it. And I thought, oh my gosh, what do I say? What do I do? But I just kept telling him, look, the reason that they are calling you the N-word is because you are really good and you are smoking them and they are trying to take you down. And that is the meanest, most hateful word that they can think of to say to you. And clearly it accomplished what they wanted to because you're getting really upset and it's taking you off your game. And so they are succeeding in what they're doing. So when you hear it, just say to yourself, I'm getting to them, they were doing it because I'm good, because if you weren't, they would ignore you. And so I think he really did start accepting that mindset, which is horrible to say, oh, my son has learned how to accept being called the N-word. But in a competitive situation like that, I think it made sense to him to say, yeah, if I was like sitting on the bench, they would never bother calling me that. But I feel like at school, it's just a whole different ball game because sometimes it's even kids in his friend group that are using the N-word or saying, making racial jokes or, calling him like watermelon boy or whatever, like stuff like that, or just random people in the hall. And I'll say, well, what do you say? And he's like, what am I going to say, Mom? What am I going to say? And then I want to call the principal or the president of the school or whatever. And he's like, Mom, it'll just make it so much worse. Just don't say anything. But I can tell it really, really bothers him because there's no getting away from that.
Yeah. So as I'm listening to you, what I'm getting is that he was able to, and you helped give him the mindset to compartmentalize people calling him this word in sports, right? Because he was so good. He's so good at his sport that's how they could get under his skin. So they were going to do anything because they certainly weren't going to win, right, with him playing. And so it sounds like for him, psychologically, he was able to make sense of it. Not that it was okay, but like he didn't get as angry. And I get what you're saying. Like, oh my gosh, the fact that he had to normalize experiencing people calling him the N-word. But it sounds like he was able to separate it from him, right? Like they're doing this because of this, because I'm so good, right? So in some ways, I wonder if it seems like he's experiencing it anew. because it's happening in a different setting.
Right.
And so those skills and strategies that he had when he was playing aren't working because it's in the hallway.
Right.
It's in class. It's with people that he's going to parties with or right. And so I wonder, have you asked him how he feels or how he makes sense of people using this word? Like, have you talked to him about his experience around this? Like, what does he say?
He said the other day, after a while, you just don't want to deal with it anymore, Mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't want to deal with it anymore. So I guess he was just taking it. This had been going on for some time at school, and he had just been taking it and just accepting it. But I think he's just gotten to the point where he's just tired of it. Because the times that he has spoken up, the reaction is usually something like, chill, dude, it's not that deep. Like they turn it around on him, like he's the problem. Like take a joke, but it's not really meant to be a joke. And so you either say nothing and you take it, or you say something and they all look at you like, what's your problem? It's not that deep.
Right.
Well, it is actually.
Right. So I'm thinking about how we can give him some strategies to navigate it, because the sad truth is, when you first said, he wants to transfer, I'm thinking, where to? And the reason I say that is there are a number, it's not necessarily about this private school, although there are things I have in mind that you could ask of this school. But there are many spaces, not just in St. Louis, but across our country, right? Like, where are you going where you're going to escape this?
Right.
And so I feel like we need to give him new strategies like you gave him when he was experiencing this playing a sport. And so, the first thing I think about is, what are the resources for him at the school, right? So they say, hey, dude, it's not that deep. Like if he responds, well, it is, and removes himself from those friends, right? What are the other options? Are the friends around the sport?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah, not necessarily.
Are there any clubs? Are there any groups at this school that support Black children, or any groups or clubs that support, or any administrators that support kids of color?
That's an excellent question.
Okay.
And I've asked him too, well, what if you found a different friend group?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, well, it doesn't matter, Mom. They all say the N-word. They're all like this. And I'm like, what if you hung around with more Black students?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd asked him, why can't you just find a new friend group? It's not a small school. There are a lot of students. And he says, well, 90% of the kids are using the N-word, so it doesn't really matter. And there are Black students there. And he does know quite a few of them, but not enough, I guess, for him to feel comfortable getting into that friend group, which is another layer of this, because being a Black child raised by non-Black parents and going to a fairly white grammar and middle school is just that he doesn't, assimilate that well into an all-Black environment.
So there sounds like, okay, a few things. I think the first thing is to be curious about what resources there are at the school for him. So, I mean, resources like, are there administrators that are dedicated to supporting kids of color, because it's such a predominantly white school for you, and potentially then to problem solve about, are there other clubs or other groups that even if he doesn't feel comfortable going to a group that's specifically for Black kids, because his own racial identity might not be set up in a way where that feels comfortable to him, that's an option. But if that doesn't feel comfortable, are there other groups or clubs that this administrator knows are better spaces than what he's currently in?
Yeah, we'll definitely have to investigate that. And when I have asked him about that, he pretty much is, in his mind, has given up on this school.
But he thinks it'll be better somewhere else.
Well, interestingly, he does have some mixed race friend groups outside of this school.
Okay.
Of kids who go to another school. And he has been telling me for quite some time, in fact, even before school, his freshman year started at the school he's going to now, he kept telling me, I think I want to go to this other school. I think I want to go to this other school. And I kept dismissing it because I put a lot of work into this school and I liked the school better. But he has been saying, because one of his very best friends that he hangs out with all the time is Black and goes to this other school. And this friend group says, yeah, it's not like that here. It's a lot more accepting here. And he does have a couple of other friends who are Black who go to this other school, and they kind of report the same things. I mean, I'm sure it still happens.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's going to happen in every space. But I don't know. I want to believe that this could be the solution.
But it sounds like you have some intel that it might be, right?
Yeah.
So my first reaction was, where are you going where it's not going to happen, right? And I say that partly because I have 2 Black boys myself, and they've been in different settings, and some of which have been private schools in St. Louis. And from what they tell me, their approach is, you got to make sure they're like, in terms of like the white boy racism of like, hey, I'm going to try this out. I'm going to see if you're okay with it. Their reaction is, you got to cut them off quick and let them know, yeah, I'm not the one. Like, you might be able to do that with someone else, but it's like you were saying, they say to him, oh, don't be so sensitive, or it's just a joke.
Yeah. It's
my
not
boys,
that deep.
Right. My boys have said that when they've experienced that and people have been like, oh, it's not that deep, they'll just be like, well, to me it is. And so one of them was saying, like, you don't laugh, you don't, right? Like, so they have their own strategies around how to navigate this. And so there's a piece of me that really wants to support you and encouraging your son to think about how he will navigate this, even if he can escape it and go to a school where he doesn't have to deal with it. Because it sounds like, again, it really gets him upset. And I'd love to say we could create a world where he won't have to encounter it.
Yes.
But he probably will.
Yeah.
And so there's a piece of me that really, even if you are able to escape, wants you to keep in your mind, like, how could you role play strategies? Or are there other Black boys that he's friends with that you could encourage him to ask, like, how do you deal with it when someone does say it? And when someone is dismissive and tells you it's no big deal, or asks you for a pass to say it because you're friends. Like, I've worked with schools, and there are often Black kids who talk about white kids asking for a pass to say the word. Because we're cool, so I should be able to say it, right? And like pressuring them.
Yeah, my son actually does distinguish between 2 different N-words.
Oh.
The N-word ending in A.
Oh, and hard R.
And the hard, he'll be like, Mom, he called me the hard R.
Right.
Like, when he says the hard R, I'm like, And I do think that a lot of these, as you mentioned, rich, county white boys, they listen to a lot of this rap music where the N-word is said all the time. And so they think it's okay. They think it's acceptable. And if we're friends, I can say it. And my son probably is guilty of letting that happen in front of him. So I think that is a good strategy that I need to say the next time some new person says that word in front of you, just no.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But he feels like they won't like him anymore, or somehow he'll be, kicked out of the group or something, that I'm like, do you want to be in this group?
But that is a conversation I think you could have with them in an ongoing way. And it could just be a rhetorical question of like, do you want to be in this group? So at this school, maybe there were things that, again, we're not saying this is your fault at all. This is on those boys who are calling you that. It's on them, right? But if we could do this over again, are there things that you would do differently to make sure you are boundaried and you let them know it is that deep to you and it's not okay to you? Because there's a piece of me that wants him to take care of himself in those situations. And as he gets older, to be able to have some strategies of things to say in response. And then there's a piece of me that's like, the school needs to take care of this.
Right.
Right.
And I do feel torn, because when I say to him that I want to tell the school that this is happening, and he is adamant that I do not, it's just going to make it worse, Mom. They're going to just get these people in trouble, or they're going to say something and it's just going to get so much worse. And I said, well, I will tell you this. If you do transfer, my exit interview is going to be all of this.
Yeah.
And he doesn't even like that very much, because he says, well, I'm still going to see these kids because it is a small world. They all still run in the same circles. And I'm like, at what point do I just say, I don't care?
Notice the variety of approaches we've talked about so far. Of course, we'd love for the school to stop the behavior, or better yet, for the kids to be mature enough not to even engage in the behavior. But the reality is, we have to help kids navigate race and racism. Notice I separate the two because they aren't one and the same. We hear that this mom who identifies as mixed race and is white presenting, struggling with the history of racism towards her Black son, and her feelings of helplessness around making it stop. Those negative experiences are acts of discrimination fueled by racism. The white boys that he's playing sports with and going to school with have learned that racial slurs will get a rise out of him, and rightfully so. The term captures the subjugation and indignities of enslavement. Them photoshopping his face onto a picture of enslaved people being whipped is a way to put him in his place and degrade him. Personally, I don't believe that chattel slavery degrades Black people. I think it degrades the people who created the system of enslavement, but I digress. The choice to tell the school or not, and how to tell the school, is one that's really personal. Yet I do think it's important for us to mark and document how our students are treated on the basis of race. But regardless of how the school responds, it's our job as parents to make sure that our children have a sense of themselves in terms of their race, and that's separate from their experiences of racism. So as parents, we need to teach them their history, remind them that slavery interrupted our history as a people. It doesn't equal who we are. Remind them of the history and the accomplishments of their racial or ethnic group. We need to cultivate a love and appreciation for their skin tone and their racial identity and who they are. And that might mean more work as a parent with a different racial identity. And what I hear from this mother is she's unsure where to follow her son's lead and let it go, and where to lean into that mama bear mentality. Now me, I'm sending emails, setting up meetings, and advocating for my son every day, all day, because even if the school doesn't do what they should do, and I'm honestly not holding my breath for that, I want my son to see that I'm fighting for him and know that we don't sit down and accept mistreatment. I sleep better knowing that I've done my part and I can only control what I can control.
I have to say something.
Yeah, and the sad part of this is that I'm not convinced something would happen.
Yeah, I mean, after my experiences, I'm not convinced either. But it would make me feel better because early in my school year, I did meet with some of the school administrators, and I told them how much I appreciated the diversity and I appreciated the effort and this and that, and made it seem like everything was great because that had been my understanding at the time.
Right.
Because I did not have full information, and I am not a person who can let that stand. If I have said something wrong or not factual, I can't not correct it.
I think you should say something. I actually think his fear of those kids getting in trouble and then thinking it was him that got them in trouble, I don't think that will happen. I support you in correcting the experience and sharing with the school whenever you feel comfortable the reality of your experience. Because I do think it's important for folks to know that, for administrators to know that, so that they don't just assume that it's a one-off when someone is adamantly saying, there's something happening to my kid. They then hopefully are able to connect some dots and say, you know what, that sounds similar to what this person said. Oh, all right. But if everyone kind of just moves along and lets the assumption stand that things are going pretty well, then if something happens and someone's willing to say something, it seems like a one-off. So I am in complete support of you figuring out how, when it feels appropriate to share the truth of your story. So this piece around him wanting to transfer, I think that, since you're asking me, right? So I'm not in your house. I'm not making this decision for you. But I actually think if he feels pretty confident that there are friends that he has at this other school, and you feel okay about the environment of that other school, this is actually a good time to transfer. So he just finished his freshman year.
Oh, yes, will be.
Will be finishing his freshman year. I think it's better to transfer now than later.
Yeah.
And I will say, if he's miserable now, being a teenager, raising a teenager can be hard in lots of ways. And so raising a teenager that's feeling beat down and mistreated like every day, like this is not just on the, in his sport when he's doing well. This is like every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to see him have to experience that and endure that. So that's where I'm saying I want to get him tips and strategies, because whether he stays or leaves, unfortunately, it's going to happen again. So how do we help support him to figure out some of that compartmentalization that he had figured out in the sports realm?
And I'm hoping, too, that in this new friend group that is mixed race and, Black, white, Asian, it's like a nice group of kids, that he'll feel braver and stronger in standing up for himself, as opposed to a friend group of just white kids who make a lot of racist jokes and say the N-word. But the other interesting thing, too, is he doesn't really want me to say anything to other parents, too, because he knows if he transfers, parents that we know will say, well, why did you leave? And I said, well, what we could say is just, it was just not a good fit, and just leave it at that. But I also feel like I almost feel compelled to say this, because I feel like so many white parents out there would be shocked, absolutely shocked, to know that their kids are using the N-word and that their kids are making racist jokes, because a lot of white parents, very well-meaning, progressive white parents, would assume their children are not using these words and are assuming their children are not like this. And sadly, they are, because in other cases, in the past, especially in sports, when other parents heard this, or when I would tell other parents that this was happening to my son, they would just be so shocked. I can't believe that happened. And I said, well, I might have been shocked a few years ago, but I'm not shocked anymore, because it happens all the time. And, what is my job of educating other white parents about what's happening?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there are ways that you might help them kind of see themselves and what's happening at their school, where they think this great place where their kid is getting shaped and formed. But I also realized, as we're talking, we talked a lot about, I realized we're talking about the N-word a lot because your son is being targeted and has been called, right? The N-word. But there was this other piece that you mentioned at the beginning about like Photoshop pictures. And so it's not just language, like that's bullying, right? So these pictures, are they depicting him as like a enslaved person?
Yeah.
That's just obnoxious.
It's awful. And I wouldn't even have believed it if he hadn't shown me.
Oh, he showed you the pictures.
He showed me one of the pictures. And it wasn't obscene, it wasn't, or graphic. It was poorly done, but it was just ridiculous. It made me just mad, because the person who did that, I'm sure, thought they were being very funny and very clever. And it was just stupid.
So stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, and to be walking through the hallways of your expensive private school in 2025 and to be just casually called a slave by some random white kid who thinks it's funny, what do you do with that,
Oh, I want to go to the school on your behalf.
Yeah, and then I'm not to say anything, because he's like, if you go to the school, I'm not going to tell you any more of these things. Yes. And I'm like, no, I have to sit with this.
Well, but no, that's where I, at the beginning, was trying to say, like, you're doing your job as a mom. Like the fact that he is coming to you and sharing with you and feels like you'll get it and will support him, right? Like that's, you're doing the right thing. You're on the right track. Like, so I know you're struggling with, how much do I share? When do I share? How do we move? Like, if parenting had a manual, wouldn't it be great?
I didn't.
Right. But you're on the right track, because you've created enough of a relationship that he's shared with you, and that you all are navigating him potentially transferring, right? So I just hope you're giving yourself grace in all of this, because like we can't predict that these when these things happen, right? It's just more like, how do we handle it and how do we manage it? And from what you shared with me, you helped him manage it in other spaces. And you even tried to escalate to authorities in the sport to try to get that figured out. Didn't work, but you helped him figure out how to navigate this. And so this is a new frontier in a sense, where he's having to navigate the level of racism in his everyday life. And so I want you to give both of you all grace, actually.
Thank you, because I'd feel really guilty when I think back on how many times I think he was trying to tell me this.
Oh.
Because, we have letter day a year, would have been a year ago, whatever, when he got a letter that he got into his number one. And then almost right away, he started telling me that he didn't really want to go there. He wanted to go to this other school. So he didn't say why.
Uh-huh.
He would just say, I think this other school might be academically a better fit for me. And I would say, oh, because you don't want to work that hard, because schoolwork's not his number one thing,
Mm-hmm.
But he would say it a lot. And I just finally was like, I don't know anyone at that school. I worked really hard for this one.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was playing sports, it was better because he could obviously focus on other things. But when
Right.
it's just no sports to hide behind, but I just looking back over the past year, I think, how many times is he trying to tell me this? And I wasn't getting it.
Yeah, but with kids, you don't know where it's coming from always. And so hindsight's 2020,
Yeah.
right? Like there are things that we understand and we know about, whether it's college and where places are sending their students, like that we look at that they don't. And so we might have opinions. And so I again would encourage you not to be too hard on yourself. You're listening. You all are navigating. You're thinking about it. You're hearing him anew, and you have more details. You have more data and information.
Yeah.
As parents, we really have to give ourselves some grace because teenagers are, well, teenagers. It's not easy to get them to talk. And sometimes between school, friends, activities, we don't see them for a ton of time. I really understand this mother being worried that her son won't share more if she goes against his request not to go to the school, because she wants to keep the lines of communication open. So one tip on teenagers is to have conversations in the car. There, they don't have to sit face to face. They don't have to make eye contact. And typically, they're pretty time limited. Even though they're trapped in the car, they know when it's going to end. So they don't have to feel like they're trapped forever in this conversation. You might also have a teen who likes to bombard you with questions late at night when it's time for them to go to bed or you're trying to go to bed. I want to encourage you to not get frustrated and take the sharing as it comes. And over time, you'll figure out what's right for you and your kid. Personally, I don't make promises up front that I won't share something if it has anything to do with someone's safety. But if it's a juicy bit of tea, I just file it away because, who doesn't like a good story? Where are you on the transfer?
Well, I have reached out to this other school and figured out what that process is. And they, without much ado, they're like, we'd be happy to have him, fill out this form, and you don't have to worry about transcripts right away because that might make it weird for him, this current school. But, we look forward to meeting you and talking with him. And so, I don't think that it would be difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really took, for me, this big push of, okay, I guess we're doing this now, because it seemed a little insurmountable. And like I said, I just kept thinking, he's encountered a lot of racism and he's learned how to deal with it. So maybe this is just another one of those things where he's going to learn how to deal with it. But then in the end, I'm like, why should he even, if he thinks it's going to be better at this other school and he has friends at this other school, what am I hanging on to here exactly?
Well, I would think it's worth asking. What are you hanging on to?
Yeah, I don't know. Just that, I thought that this school would be really good for him.
Mm-hmm.
And it did seem like he had a lot of friends there
Mm-hmm.
at first. And he does still have friends there. But these friends, while they don't necessarily call him the N-word or make these jokes, they also don't
stand up. So they
for
are
it.
bystanders and complicit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, I could see there's a lot of layers of like teachable moments also for him to think about, like, who's a real friend? That's not a friend.
Yeah.
That's not a friend. So they're not directly harming you, but they're harming you.
Right.
And
Like
so
they're seeing you going through this and they
they're
let
not
it
standing
happen.
up for you. And so that's what also gets me. Like, I want you to think about how you might help him just reflect, because it's almost like a self-respect thing. Like, you
He
deserve
deserved
to
it.
be treated well, not just when you're performing in your sport, all the time. And I think that sort of acquiescence in terms of like experiencing this from people he calls his friends, I think kids learn it in all sorts of ways, right? But for him, I think around this race issue, it's worth him reflecting on. And that doesn't mean he has to like go on a crusade and give people speeches and tell the teacher all the time and tell the principal. But it feels like it got out of balance for him. Like he ate it and ate it and ate it and then was like, I am done.
That's exactly it. And I think it really started for him maybe a year or two ago when he started going to a lot of parties. He's a very social kid. So he was going to a lot of, rich, white West County homes. I mean, I'm dropping him off at these incredible places like, who do you know who lives here? And that's what he would hear at these parties. And when he would start telling me, I'm like, you need to say something. What am I going to say, Mom? And I'm like, you don't have to say anything. You could just walk away, give them a look. Like, you don't have to put up with that. Well, everybody says it. Okay, but you
still don't have to put up with it.
Yeah. But then I think his fear was, he's this, maybe at these parties there'd be one or two other black faces that he would see. And he didn't want to be the one who was creating a scene. Although a couple of times he told me, oh, it was great. There was, the other black kid at this party was 6'4" and he wasn't having it. And I was like, okay, good. Well, you're not that big, but like, you don't have to be harming it either.
You don't. And so that piece around like helping him think about how he sets those boundaries for himself in his own way, I think would be really important. And for him to realize he's the prize. And if you're not like in a relationship, right? Like, if people don't want to be around you just because you check them and you don't get invited to a party because you want some self-respect, like, that maybe isn't that important.
Yeah.
Now I know these are kids and they think
it's hard. It's
everything.
Hard.
Right. But like, your kids. So how can you pepper those lessons in around like, yeah, you don't deserve that. Or are there other examples in his life where he's seen someone put up with something, right? Like, I think about, if they know someone who unfortunately like has been bullied in another way and is like put up with it, or and then they're like, why didn't they stick up for themselves? Or I'm brainstorming here, but there's a piece that I want him to, or maybe it's for you as his mom, like a kernel of like, for him to realize that this experience, regardless of if he stays or goes, and it sounds like he's going, what he can learn about how he wants to move in the future when people do this.
Yeah, I think I'm hoping that by changing this friend group and changing to this new school, that it will give him a little bit more confidence, because I feel like a lot of his reticence to stand out for himself has just been because he was usually the only or one of the only black faces in a group, and he did not feel secure to say something. I'm hoping that will change now, because he's been this friend group that he's hanging out with now. I can definitely see that he's much happier, and that he feels like this is a place he can go where he won't have to hear that in the hallways constantly.
Right.
But then I also worry, like, okay, what if we do make this change and it's not everything that he thought it was going to be? Then what? Then crushing disappointment that it wasn't as different as he had been hoping.
She's really putting a lot of hope into this new environment. And you also hear me really skeptical that the change of environment is the answer here. So we problem solve for the months that remain at the current school, because a few months in a toxic space is a really long time. As I'm listening, though, it becomes more clear that regardless of the environment, her son has some work to do, advocating for himself and feeling a sense of self-worth that doesn't make space to be treated poorly by people who call themselves friends. Yeah, but I think psychologically, the crushing disappointment, like worst case scenario, crushing disappointment that it wasn't what he hoped for, you still can learn and maybe transfer again, right? Is better than staying in a place that you know is soul crushing.
Yeah, true.
Like you saw him not be happy.
I know, and I hate that. That is
And so
the worst.
Right. And so to send him back into that battle that he's feeling defeated, and that's that piece around he's going to be there for some more months. So that's where I think it's worth having the conversation about what are the resources at the school. And this piece around he might not feel immediately comfortable around a all Black group of kids, but are there some Black kids that he could ally with, or even just some non-white kids who are, I know it's a predominantly white school, but are there other kids that he could cultivate?
Yeah, and I
with?
know that there are other Black students that he is friends with, but they're not in his grade. And so he tells me that's the problem. He's like, I know so-and-so and so-and-so. We're friends, but they're out in the same class. And so they don't beat each other, which I get, it's like kind of pointless if you can't ever fee them. But he does have one teacher in particular that he is very close to who really has been supportive of him. So I think that's the person that I'm going to reach out to. In fact, my son said that he was going to talk to this teacher himself.
Okay.
So I'll check in and see if he did.
Because this could be
and that'll open the door.
Yes, this could be an opportunity for him to practice advocating for himself and for you to walk him through advocating for himself. So some of that mom, don't talk to the school could also be age appropriate, and that he's getting older and doesn't want mom running to the school for everything. But, we're still there. We still care. And sometimes we need to run to the school.
Right. Sometimes the school needs to know these things are happening.
Yes. Yeah. I just want to name, I get, as parents, we have this vision about like where our kids will land and what will be good for them. And so, don't be hard on yourself. You thought this would be a good fit. They sold a nice veneer of what was possible or what they thought they had. You even felt like at the beginning of the year that they were making efforts, but his lived experience day in and day out has just not matched.
No.
And there's no way that you could have known that.
And I don't see it getting better. I see it getting worse with the current political climate and doing away with DEI, and diversity is bad. And I just feel like these white kids will keep pushing the line, because why not? If there is never any consequence to it.
Yep. So I appreciate you sharing, because I do think that people assume that when folks talk about their kid experiencing racism, that it's just one or two kids, that it's just one or two bad apples. And what you're saying is that there's a culture and climate that's predominant at the school. Not that everyone at the school, right? But there's enough people to make your son feel like, I gotta go. I need to get out. And he's not alone. I hear from other folks too about, different schools, and sometimes the class really does make a difference, like what year level, right? Like there might be a good crop of kids, and then there might be a year that they're more competitive and it's cutthroat academically. And then there might be a group of kids that is, in this case, hateful and bullying and anti-Black. And so, you could write it off as, oh, it's just this class, but it doesn't sound like there's any stopgaps, anything in the school that's speaking out against it. And that's the piece around, at what point do you share with the school, honestly, what happened and what resources do they have to not only support the kids, but to keep it from happening? Because that's my thing. I have a son who at a private school was having some difficulties with not language in terms of like the N-word, but like people messing with his hair and just
there's a lot of touching of the hair.
A lot. And so we told him, basically, that's your body. They don't consent to touch your body. If you have to respond accordingly, like, we support you. And it had happened enough, like in the lunchroom, outside of classroom spaces, that I was about to say something and create a paper trail for the head of school. And the teacher said, oh, he didn't seem too bothered by it. I was like, well, so this is what happens, right? You assume someone's not bothered because they're trying to get along, just like your son is experiencing, right? You're trying to be like, it's not a big deal. You're trying to maybe laugh it off and it'll stop faster. That's how abuse happens, right? That's how awful things happen in our society, right? We try to get along and go along to get along, but we're being mistreated. And so I sent her some articles to read about that. And then I told the head of school, things have happened in these different spaces, but now it's happened in a classroom space. And so I am writing to let you know people are not to touch him and that we support him. And I said, what you won't be doing is calling him into your office because he doesn't need to talk to anyone. You need to talk to your students and teachers. This experience within these predominantly white spaces, our kids are having to carry that. And so it's our job to be those spaces for them to feel comfortable sharing it with us. But it's hard because it doesn't mean we can just fix it. So I say that from a point of empathy.
Yeah. There was a case in one of my son's classes where there was one other Black student in his class, and the teacher kept confusing the two of them.
Oh my gosh.
Even though they don't look anything alike. And my son got in trouble one time because I don't remember what happened, but she said, it's like last week, I told you last week that blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I wasn't here last week because he had been out. And she didn't believe her. It's like still said, this is your third strike or whatever. And he got in trouble. And I said, if your teacher is confusing you with the other Black kid in your class, I really want to say something to her. Because I went to the open house. I met her and she said hi to me the last time I saw her. Like I know her by face.
Yes.
Like it wouldn't be weird for me to say, hey, by the way.
Right. Yeah. That's a time where I would have been like, mama's going into the school. So good for you for restraining yourself on that one and respecting his request. Cause that would have been hard.
Yeah.
So that to me is that bigger arc of him standing up for himself, which isn't just about race, but it's a piece of it.
It is a piece of it for sure.
Yeah. That's tough. That's so
really
tough.
I know, because he's such a bright kid. He's just got such a spark, and he's just always been the funniest, most popular kid. And to see this past year that it's just, when you see a little bit of the light dimming, I'm like, oh, God, what do I do?
Well, you're doing what you need to do. You're getting him out of the situation. You're doing what you need to do. Because there will be enough things in this world that'll dim their light.
Yeah. And it's just maddening because there are still so many people who don't even believe that there is racism out there, and it is a very frustrating thing to be like, oh, I see this every day. You are living in your own little tiny myopic world.
Yeah.
And you don't see it.
Yeah. And so that's why we fight for our kids. And so I'm glad you're fighting for him. And even if that means going to a school that you didn't have in mind for him, you're fighting for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you.
I really do appreciate you sharing because you didn't have to.
Yeah, I'm getting a little eerie because bringing this all up.
It's a lot.
It is a lot.
Because you watch your kid and you're like, are they going to be okay? And is what I'm doing enough? It's hard.
It's really hard.
It's hard.
Yeah. And kind of going through it alone, too, just always constantly questioning myself. Like, am I making the right choice? Is there somebody else I should be bringing into this? And that's why I appreciated when I reached out to you and you were like, you know what? Let's talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's hard to know sometimes, like, what do I bring this to?
It is. It's hard. And I don't claim to have all the answers. I hope what I've shared has been helpful for you to think through, how you move forward. But I'm telling you, parenting is the hardest job I've ever done. It's so humbling.
Mm-hmm.
And these dynamics around racism and making sure, like you said, that light in our kids gets to shine and doesn't get snuffed out, over some mess, right? Like that is clear to me that there's an army of Black women who have navigated this on behalf of, to protect their kids. And my perspective has always been anyone who is raising a Black child is a part of that community. And so if you ever need to talk about something or think through something, I'm happy to share. And it doesn't mean I know it all, but it is something to raise a Black boy
Mm-hmm.
in this country.
And sometimes it's just nice to be like, is this happening? Is this really?
You,
Is this
you
real?
are not alone.
Okay, thank you.
Right. And it doesn't make it okay.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean we accept it, but you're not alone. And you're doing the best you can. And here's some things you could try. And yeah, sometimes it's good enough just to be able to like touch someone else who's experienced it. So yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I hope this conversation was helpful. You know, we don't want our kids being the one saying the hateful things, and we certainly don't want our kids being the target. So it requires that we share with each other and not be embarrassed if we don't have all the answers as parents. Because the great thing is that kids are malleable and they're resilient. So for our kids who've been bullied because of race, it's unfortunate, but they can learn some tough lessons about themselves, friendships, and what it looks like to self-advocate. And if it's your kid who's being hateful, it's really important to call them on their behavior. Remind them that it doesn't equal who they are, but they have a choice and a responsibility in terms of how they repair and move forward. Now, these teachers and administrators, the adults in this situation, I have a little less grace for, because they should be adamant about creating spaces where, while these incidents might happen because of the society we live in, that it's clear that they're unacceptable and that they come with consequences. This is not a St. Louis problem. We just happen to be in St. Louis. It's a problem across the country. And the ways our schools are segregated and the potential increase in segregated spaces means that those kids of color in predominantly white spaces likely will have more of a burden to navigate racist incidents. I think that schools can't morally turn their head or just write these incidents off as anomalies. So if you have a question that you want to ask Dr. Banks about how to support your child who's navigating discrimination or experiencing racism or other types of oppression, really, if you want to ask any question, reach out at stories@raisingequity.org or on social media at Dr. Kira Banks. Thanks for joining me on The Kira Banks Show.